Hi everyone, my name is Valerie. Welcome to the owner's class video for the Singer Fashion Mate 3342 sewing machine. In this video, we're going to go over some great stuff like threading a needle, winding a bobbin, selecting a stitch, and a bunch of other really cool stuff. When you open your box, you get, obviously your machine, but you also get an instruction manual full of all sorts of great information. And you also get a handy dandy quick start guide full of a lot of great pictures to get you started. Let's take a tour of the machine. The first thing we need to do with our machine is plug in the power cord and foot control into the side, and right above that is the on-off switch. So we're going to turn on our machine and you'll know it's on when the light comes on. We have our hand wheel with arrows printed on it to remind you to always turn the hand wheel towards you. We have a stitch selector dial to select stitches, a stitch length dial to change the stitch length. On the top we have the bobbin winding stopper, the bobbin winding spindle, the spool pin where we'll put our thread, a handle to make our machine extra portable, the stitch width dial, the tension dial, which fine-tunes the look of our stitches, a bobbin winding tension disc, a metal guide, another metal guide, the take-up lever, which is super important when we thread the machine, and we'll go over that later. On the front we have a reverse lever so that we can sew in reverse. Down the machine we have our needle, an all-purpose foot. Behind the all-purpose foot is a presser foot lifter, which allows us to raise and lower our presser foot. We have a built-in needle threader, a buttonhole lever, and we'll go over that when we make a buttonhole. We also have a bobbin and a clear view bobbin cover so we can always see it. We can remove this accessory tray to expose the free arm, which is really great if you're sewing anything circular like cuffs or pants hems. In the accessory tray we have a bunch of cool accessories, such as extra bobbins, a spool cap, seam ripper. Let's take a look at all of the presser feet that come with this machine. In addition to the all-purpose foot that already comes on your machines, you get 4 other presser feet. You get the Sew Easy foot, which comes with a guide, which is great for sewing any seam allowances, and it makes sewing those seams so easy. You get a buttonhole foot for sewing those one-step buttonholes. You get a button sewing foot, which is the foot that's transparent with little blue prongs, and that allows you to use the zigzag stitch to attach your button to your project. Lastly, you get a zipper foot, which, like its name, is for attaching zippers, but you can also use it for creating and attaching piping. When threading our machine, the first thing we need to do is thread the bobbin. So let's raise the presser foot lifter and move this little black button over to pop the clear view cover off, where we can get out our bobbin. This machine uses transparent class 15 bobbins. So if you have to go to the store and buy more bobbins, make sure they are a transparent class 15 bobbin. Otherwise, it's not going to work in your machine very well, kind of like putting the wrong part in your car. To thread our bobbin, first let's put our spool of thread on the spool pin and cap that off with a spool cap. On the top of our machine are some diagrams. There's some in gray and some in blue, and for bobbin winding we are going to follow the blue diagrams. So number 1, we are going to put our thread into this guide and bring it down to our bobbin winding tension disc. So according to the diagram, we're going to come down this side and make sure the thread really gets under there. You might want to floss the thread slightly, kind of like you're flossing your teeth. Bring the thread over to our bobbin winding spindle, retrieve your bobbin, which has 2 holes in it on the top and bottom, and the top and the bottom are interchangeable, it doesn't matter which. Bring the thread into the middle and out the top, and hold on to this thread tail. We're going to push the bobbin onto the bobbin winding spindle. You'll hear it click into place, and make sure that it's all the way on this bobbin winding spindle, or the thread could wind onto the spindle itself, and it's kind of a pain to get off. Move the bobbin winding spindle over to the right, hold the tail in your hand, and wind the bobbin to bury the tail by pressing on the foot pedal. Once the thread is buried, clip the tail so that it's flush with the top. You don't want a little tail hanging off because that can cause tension issues. Now, wind it either until it is full or until you're satisfied with how much thread is on your bobbin. When you're finished winding, move the bobbin winding spindle back to the left and pull it off and clip your thread. Now you're ready to put it into the bobbin case. When placing your bobbin in the bobbin case, make sure the thread is coming off the bobbin in a counterclockwise motion. And an easy way to tell is put the bobbin in your hand and the thread coming off of it should make the entire thing look like the letter P. P for perfect sewing. Now put the bobbin into the bobbin case, put your finger on the bobbin, and bring the thread around under this gray piece with the arrow. Bring it down, up, around this black piece, back down, and over this thread trimmer. Then take your clear view cover and place it back on top. Now we're ready to thread the top of the machine. If you've just wound your bobbin, the top of your machine probably looks like mine does right now. So I'm going to take the thread off of the bobbin winding tension disc. It's already in the first guide, labeled number 1 on the gray diagram, so I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to bring it to number 2 and bring the thread in between these 2 metal pieces. I'm going to bring it down number 3, do a U-turn at number 4, and bring it back up to 5. And 5 is our take-up lever. So I'm going to move the thread from right to left and bring it back down. And the thread will go into the eye of the take-up lever. And it's very important that the thread ends up there or the machine will not sew correctly. I'm going to come back down to number 6. I'm going to put my thread behind this metal guide. And then I'm going to put it in a metal guide right above the needle. Next, I'm going to turn the hand wheel towards me until the needle is in the highest position. Now I'm ready to use the built-in needle threader. So I'm going to push down on this white piece and move the thread under and over this metal hook. 2 prongs will encompass the needle. Move your thread in between those prongs and lightly hold your thread as you release the needle threader. This has created a loop right behind your needle. Pull on that loop and move the thread under the presser foot towards the back of the machine, and you've threaded your needle. Now it's time to select a stitch, and right now I want to select a straight stitch. In this case, it's already selected on my machine, but if it's not on yours, all you need to do is turn your stitch selector dial so that the illustration matches with the little bump above your stitch selector dial, and you can hear it and feel it click into place. I'm on the straight stitch, but I see a gray stitch, a blue stitch, and a red stitch. So how do I know which one I'm going to sew? Up on my stitch length dial, I have a gray area, a blue S1, and a red S2. If my little bump above the stitch length dial is lined up with the gray area, I'm going to sew a gray stitch. If I turn it so that I have the blue S1 stitch selected, I will sew a blue stitch. And if I turn it again to the red S2, I will sew the red stitch. But I want to sew this gray stitch, so I'm going to move my stitch length dial to the gray zone, and I'm going to set it for about 2.5, which is standard for most fabrics and straight stitch sewing. This machine also has a stitch width dial, and for straight stitch sewing, I want it set to 0. Now we're ready to test and make sure we threaded our machine properly. When testing to make sure that you have threaded your machine properly, I recommend always sewing on a scrap piece of fabric and not your project first. So I have some scrap material here. I'm going to put it under my presser foot and lower it. And I'm going to begin sewing by pressing on the foot control. I'm going to turn the hand wheel towards me so the needle is in the highest position. Lift the presser foot lifter and trim the thread. Stitch looks good on the top and the bottom. So we are ready to sew. Our machine is threaded properly. If your stitches look like this on the top and loopy on the bottom, it means that your machine isn't threaded properly. I recommend rethreading your machine, and you can look in your quick start guide and instruction manual for more information. Now it's the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time to sew a seam on your project. On your needle plate, you have some markings, such as 3/8, 5/8, and 1 inch. A lot of commercial patterns use a 5/8 seam allowance, so I am going to put my fabric under my presser foot so it lines up with the 5/8 line. I'm going to lower my presser foot and stitch a few stitches forward by pressing down on my foot control. Now I'm going to raise the needle to the highest position by turning the hand wheel towards me. I'm going to press and hold the reverse lever and sew backwards a few stitches. Now I'm going to release the reverse lever and I'm going to sew along my seam. Notice that I'm not pushing or pulling the fabric. The feed dogs are doing all of the work for me. I'm just guiding it along the guideline. Sew to the end of your fabric, raise the needle in the highest position, press and hold the reverse lever and sew backwards a few stitches. Now release the reverse lever and sew back to the end. Turn the hand wheel towards you so the needle's in the highest position, raise your presser foot lifter and trim the threads. Now we have a finished seam. I sewed backwards at the beginning and the end to secure the stitches. That way our project doesn't unravel. This machine comes with a Sew Easy foot, which might make it especially easy for beginners to stay in line with your seam. It has markings on the side to show you seam allowances such as 3/8, 1/2 inch, and 5/8. The 5/8 line is the third red mark over, so that's where I'm going to move my guide. Now we need to change the presser foot. Hold your foot and push it towards you, and it will just pop off. Take your Sew Easy foot and push it away from you, and it's attached. Put your thread under the presser foot. Now I'm going to sew a seam using the Sew Easy foot. Place your fabric under the foot so that the edge of the seam lines up with the guide. Lower the presser foot and press on the foot control to sew forward a few stitches. Turn the hand wheel towards you so the needle's in the highest position. Press and hold your reverse lever and sew backwards a few stitches. Release the reverse lever, turn the hand wheel towards you so the needle's in the highest position, and begin sewing your seam. All I need to do is line up the fabric with this guide as I sew, and it makes it super easy to see my seam. Sew to the end, turn the hand wheel towards you so the needle's in the highest position, and press and hold your reverse lever for a few stitches. Release your reverse lever and sew forwards to the end. Now turn the hand wheel towards you again so the needle's in the highest position, raise your presser foot, and trim the threads. Now we've sewn a seam with the Sew Easy foot. Now I want to sew some decorative stitches. I'm going to turn my stitch selector dial to this illustration where we see a multi-stitch zigzag, a honeycomb stitch, and a feather stitch. First, I'm going to sew the multi-step zigzag stitch. So I'm going to come up to the stitch length dial, and it's already in the gray zone. I'm going to move it to 3, just to see how that looks. Then I'm going to come up to my stitch width dial, and I can move it anywhere from 1 to 6, 1 being narrow, 6 being very wide. I want to make a wide stitch, so I'm going to leave it at 6. I highly recommend sewing on a scrap piece of material with the same fabric as your project. This will allow you to fine-tune the look of your stitch exactly how you want. Now I'm going to take my fabric, place it under the presser foot, lower the presser foot, and press on the foot control to start sewing. Turn the hand wheel towards you so the needle's in the highest position. Raise your presser foot lifter and trim the thread. And there is our beautiful multi-step zigzag. Now I want to sew the blue honeycomb stitch. I'm going to come up to the stitch length dial and move it so I have the blue S1 selected, blue and blue. I'm going to keep my stitch width dial at 6 because I want this stitch to be as wide as possible, but you can always customize it for what you want. Now I'm going to put my fabric under the presser foot, lower it, and press on the foot control to begin sewing. Turn the hand wheel towards you so the needle's in the highest position. Raise your presser foot lifter and trim the thread. And here we have a fabulous honeycomb stitch. Last, I want to make this red feather stitch. The stitch is already selected on the stitch selector dial. I just need to come up to my stitch length dial and turn it so that I have the red S2 selected, red and red. And my stitch width dial is still set to 6, and I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to place my fabric under the presser foot and lower it, and begin sewing again. Turn the hand wheel towards you so the needle is in the highest position. Raise the presser foot, trim the threads, and here we have a spectacular feather stitch. Now let's talk about some zigzags. The zigzag stitch on your machine is a highly versatile stitch and can be used for utility and decorative sewing. I played around with the stitch length and stitch width dials on the machine to give an example of how you can really customize the look. On the left 3, I left the stitch length at about a medium, but I made a narrow zigzag, one at about a medium width, and a wide one. And on the 3 to the right, I left the width at about a medium, but I changed the length. So a long zigzag, a medium zigzag, and a short zigzag. Play around with your dials, have some fun, let's sew a buttonhole. To make a buttonhole, we need our one-step buttonhole foot. This accessory can be found in your removable storage compartment. To use this foot, you will see a button illustration at the top. Pull on that so it comes out. Place your button inside and press down so that it is snug. This means that the machine will make a buttonhole perfectly sized for your button. I need to mark where I'm going to sew the buttonhole on my fabric. So I'm going to place the button on my fabric where I want the buttonhole to be. I need to mark the bottom of the buttonhole, which is where it will start sewing. Then I will use my ruler to make a line in the middle. This is just to help me keep my fabric straight when I put it under the buttonhole foot. Now I just need to select my stitch and sew it out. I'm going to remove my all-purpose foot and snap on my one-step buttonhole foot. To select the buttonhole, go to your stitch selector dial and move it to the icon that looks like a little buttonhole. Go up to your stitch length dial and move it to this little buttonhole icon. So it will stitch out my buttonhole. Then come up to the stitch width dial and move it to the number 6. Now we have one last thing to do before we actually start stitching. The last thing we need to do before we stitch out our buttonhole is lower the buttonhole lever located to the left of your presser foot and push it back. Now we're ready to start sewing. I'm going to place my fabric next to my presser foot and line up the bottom line so that it will be under this hole. Now I'm going to lower the presser foot and start sewing. When you've reached the bottom bar tack, turn the hand wheel towards you so that the needle is in the highest position. Raise the presser foot, and here is a perfect buttonhole for your button. If you want to make more buttonholes, just push this lever back and you're ready to go again. To finish off our buttonhole, get a hand sewing needle and that last thread, push it through to the other side and tie it off. Now to open it up, use a pin and stab it through the top. This protects the upper bar tack so that we don't cut through it. In your accessory tray, there's a seam ripper, and it's also super useful for opening buttonholes. Place it at the bottom and work your way up. Remove your pin. And ta-da! A fully functioning buttonhole. To make your stitches further apart on your buttonhole, you want to be on the left side of this buttonhole icon on your stitch length dial. In the middle of the icon, they start to get closer together. And when you are on the right of that buttonhole icon on your stitch length dial, your stitches are very close together. From time to time, you'll need to change the needle on your machine, depending on what kind of fabric you're sewing. Two very common types of needles are regular point needles and ballpoint needles. Regular point needles are used for non-stretchy woven fabrics, such as quilting cotton, silk, and wool. Ballpoint needles are used for sewing stretchy knit fabrics like swimsuit knits, t-shirt knits, and sweatshirt knits. Both styles come in a variety of sizes depending on the material. We have it sized for lightweight, medium weight, and heavyweight fabrics. Let's see how to change a needle. To make changing the needle a little easier, I'm going to remove the presser foot. And quick tip, just to make sure I don't accidentally drop the needle into the bobbin area of my machine, I'm going to put a piece of paper here just to cover it up. Take the L-shaped screwdriver that came in your accessory tray, hold your needle, and turn the screw toward you and remove the needle. Take your new needle with the flat side towards the back of the machine, facing away from you, and insert it until it will not go up any higher, and tighten the screw. It's so easy. And that's our video. Thanks for watching. For more information, please check out the Singer website. Happy sewing!